Hello, everyone. Thank you, Russell, and thank you, everyone, for having given the opportunity to come in here and speak today. So, SRIF. What is SRIF? I think it was originally founded in 2020, and I know that it's been something that's been discussed here with the board off and on over the years. But I'm here to share with you what the current incarnation of SRIF is. SRIF has always had the mission of protecting the health and welfare of standardbreds by funding investigations into misconduct in the standardbred industry. But the question has always been how? How does SRIF carry out that mission? How does it compel people to participate in its investigations? How does it effectively do what it's supposed to do? And I think that's something that SRIF has struggled with over the years. But about a year ago, Russell and I started a conversation that I've carried on with our friends at the USTA, a lot of very smart lawyers in my firm, and we have settled on a new plan for SRIF in which we've entered into a formal alliance agreement with the USTA, in which the USTA has empowered SRIF to carry out its investigative authority for violations of its rules and bylaws. So effectively, the USTA has deputized SRIF to investigate misconduct in the standardbred industry via its power and investigative authority over its membership in its rules and bylaws. We're doing this in conjunction with an investigator named Vicki Humphreys. Vicki is a 23-year veteran of the FBI in the Philadelphia region. She focused on corruption and fraud investigations. Her firm is called HML Group, and all of the members are former federal law enforcement with expertise in auditing, forensic work, in addition to on-the-ground field work and investigative expertise. Vicki is one of the most accomplished FBI agents in the history of Philadelphia, and we're very lucky to have her on the team. So I have partnered with Vicki to lead this investigative effort on behalf of SRIF, in conjunction with our colleagues at the USTA. And again, we formed what's called an alliance agreement in which we collaborate with one another to select investigations that we think are worth putting resources towards and are going to have significance to the mission of SRIF of, again, protecting the welfare of horses through weeding out misconduct in the industry. So, when you ask the question, or if one were to ask the question, how does SRIF carry out its investigations, the question is effectively, how does the USTA exercise its investigative and enforcement authority against its membership? And I understand that this has been a question that has been pondered and grappled with amongst the membership of the USTA for a very long time. And that primarily involves the interplay between the USDA's membership authority, licensing authority, and state actors. I'm sure you're all familiar with Rule 1.03, in which if a state licenses an individual to participate in racing in their jurisdiction, the USTA will grant them a license regardless of whether it independently had determined that that individual should or shouldn't be licensed in whatever capacity. So again, the question is, given that reality that the board and that the USDA has always grappled with, what is it that SRIF or the USDA can do to effectively investigate and enforce its rules and bylaws? So I think the initial determination has to be what falls within the scope of the rules and bylaws. And it's effectively every aspect of standardbred racing: syndication of stallions, ownership of horses, racing, training, everything. And in contrast, states don't actually have the kind of interest and jurisdiction over every single aspect of standardbred racing in the same fashion. So that's an important distinction in which there's daylight between the authority of the USTA and state actors. That unique power in the USTA is at its apex with respect to registration. States generally just defer to the USTA in the registration of a standardbred horse, and the USTA has strict rules about the ownership of horses that are registered, and by extension, where those horses can race, where they can run. Similarly, the syndication of stallions is under the exclusive jurisdiction of of the USTA. So an important factor is, I think that there has been in some fashion a misunderstanding and underappreciation of the type of authority that the USTA has over its membership in relation to state actors. Part of, I think, our thinking on this takes into account a different perspective on the standard bread industry that maybe is less focused than on-track activity. I grew up in the horse business, as Russell mentioned. I went to the track maybe 10 times a year, but every day of my life growing up, I was in the horse business. There is an entire economy surrounding the standard bread industry that expands beyond just what happens on a given racetrack. And I think it's that economy and the ability of USDA members to effectively participate in the standardbred business where the USDA has significant authority that is apart from and in addition to the type of authority exercised by state actors. So that's one instance where there's room for the USDA to exercise power and influence over its members in ways that state actors simply cannot. It's important also to understand in how we're going to carry out this mission what SRIF is not. SRIF is not responsible for enforcing or investigating every single violation of the USDA's rules or any kind of infraction that may have occurred. We selectively identify certain investigations that we think warrant resources and attention. Part of that selection process allows us to avoid potential problems that may arise between that interplay between what the USDA does and what a state actor may do. The types of investigations we're doing are not ones where there's going to be a problem if there's a finding of misconduct with the state exercising reciprocity or recognizing the work that we've done. So that's an important factor of it as well. Also, just this last Monday, Vicki and I appeared at the ORI conference in Philadelphia, and we're also not bound, like state actors, to account for all of the activities and misconduct that may be going on within their jurisdictions. We can select a few investigations and persist over time if needed. We can devote the necessary resources to investigate the misconduct in question, whereas state actors struggle with resources. They struggled with time and attention. And so the idea is we can focus on things that those state actors cannot. We're already developing relationships with our partners in state racing commissions to work with them in terms of sharing information and supporting them in their investigations. So the idea is this will be a collaborative effort on behalf of and between the USDA and these state actors, not one in which we would be supplanting their authority. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Also, we're more flexible. The USDA as a member organization is not a state actor that's bound by certain kinds of constraints about power exercised by the government against an individual. We have, in some ways, more freedom and flexibility to investigate our membership than a state actor would. So there are a number of advantages we would have as SRIF working through the USDA to effectuate investigations that state actors may struggle to accomplish. Also, an important part of it is the work product that we produce. One of the reasons that we have retained Vicki and her team and that I believe I'm involved is because we've spent a lot of time in law enforcement and we know how to develop evidence, to develop records, to establish a case as if it were going to be presented in a criminal trial under the highest level of due process and scrutiny. And so part of the advantages we would have is whatever we're developing, whatever we would have, could be turned over to a state actor and withstand scrutiny in any forum, whether it's civil, administrative, or criminal. And on that last point, this is an important facet of what we're targeting to do. One of the reasons, again, that we've retained Vicki is that she has contacts in federal law enforcement in every corner of the country. We have teams of investigators that we can call on anywhere that standardbred racing is going on. We are not just looking to sanction people under the USTA rules. We're aiming for far higher than that. As we know that there are instances in which very high-profile problems in racing have been exposed recently, and we have every intention of investigating that kind of activity, and indeed we're already doing so. So again, we are looking to not just through the USTA's rules, we are going to be exercising the authority of this organization against its members. But our objectives in terms of what we hope to accomplish go far beyond that. I'm going to be here this afternoon. This isn't everything. There's a lot of thought and energy has gone into this project. My bio is there. Please reach out to me. Contact us through TC and our friends at the USTA. We've already established an excellent dialogue with a lot of state and private actors in this realm, and we intend to continue to do that and foster that. If you have information, tips, insights to provide us, we welcome that. And are looking forward to launch. This project is actually just recently launched, and we're getting started, and we're very optimistic about what we're going to do. All of these plans have come together and been stress tested by the experts here at the USTA. With council, we feel like we are on very firm ground in terms of the authority that we are going to be exercising and the powers that we have. And we're very, again, optimistic about where we're going. It's a new era for SRIF, and we hope a new era for the USTA in terms of its ability to enforce its rules and bylaws. And I think that's really the principle that we've come back to on many calls and many discussions about what we're going to do and what we can do and what kind of powers we have. In the end, this is a membership organization. And if a membership organization cannot enforce its rules and bylaws against its own members, then inevitably those rules and bylaws will not be abided. And I think that there is a firm and collective understanding and commitment by the USTA that to the extent it's been under-enforced in the past, that is stopping. And that SRIF's mission is to carry out that belief and understanding amongst the leadership of this organization that we will be doing everything we possibly can to ensure that the integrity of the industry is maintained. So before I go down, though, I would love to hear some questions here on the podium if anybody has one. Otherwise, I'll be available all afternoon. Please, stand up.
Do you have subpoena power?
We have power under the rules and bylaws to demand records from USTA membership, yes. And failure to comply with those demands can result in sanctions, including the revocation of a license or membership. Please.
Do you have or can you get any of the other usual investigative tools like search and seizure or wiretap?
No. So our powers are exclusive to what's afforded in the rules and bylaws. They're pretty extensive in terms of compelling people who are members to provide information when it's demanded and otherwise participate in an investigation, but we don't have wiretap authority. And that's an excellent question because that goes to the idea, though, of working with law enforcement. In my 15-now-year career, both as a criminal defense attorney and a prosecutor, some of the information we've received through the USTA, tips of misconduct, are things you would never dream of seeing as a police officer or a prosecutor. There is ample information and allegations of misconduct in our hands now that if a law enforcement entity were inclined, they could immediately initiate a criminal investigation. So what we're doing in part is building up that probable cause. We're building up that evidence, whether it culminates in something that's exclusively carried out by the USTA in conjunction with the state administration or with law enforcement. The idea is to be able to hand over that information when appropriate that would allow a state law enforcement, whether it be the FBI or Attorney General's office or a prosecutor's office, to execute search warrants, to execute wiretaps, to engage in that kind of greater investigative power that's exclusive to prosecutorial entities. Please.
If a USTA member makes a report of something that is an infraction or suspicious activity, are they able to find out if you decided that you've identified that as one of the reports that you're going to investigate?
Also a very good question. I'm glad you brought it up. So one of the prerequisites, frankly, before Vicki or I would even get involved in a project like this is, and this I appreciate this from my time as a Deputy Attorney General. I was one of the attorneys that worked on the Attorney General's investigation to the Catholic Diocese sexual abuse in Pennsylvania. And I've gone to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court on a number of occasions arguing the idea of reputation clause and the impact of allegations of misconduct and affording people the requisite due process before that happens. Vicki and I are very sensitive to that. So all of our investigations are confidential up until the point in which there would be some sort of public allegation. So if an individual reported an allegation to us, that's not going to come out, at least through us, in any kind of public disclosure. If there's a record demand, if there's an outreach to a target, we don't share that with anyone. Now, again, if someone goes and tells their neighbor about it, we can't control that. But if someone makes a report to SRIF or through the USTA and we consider it, we could probably have some sort of discrete dialogue in terms of our follow-up on that. But otherwise, whether or not we would be pursuing it generally is going to be confidential. The information that we receive is secure. It's the kind of thing that, as a law firm, we handle a lot of very sensitive documents. Everything we handle, frankly, is that we have a legal obligation, whether it's financial records, medical records. Everything is managed in a way where there's no risk of, if you are, for example, receive a demand and you're requesting sensitive information, we have protocols in place where there's no risk that that's going to get into the wrong hands. Again, the idea is we're effectively handling this like a criminal justice entity. Through me, through Vicki, through the protocols we have, with the sort of discretion and security that you would expect. Because again, just because you've received a letter in the mail or if you've had a demand for records, doesn't mean you've done anything wrong, or that there will be a finding that you did anything wrong. It's absolutely critical that we protect those reputations, that we respect our membership, just like anyone here would expect. And then again, there would only be any kind of public disclosure of that information upon a finding, and also in a manner that would be consistent with the USTA's rules and bylaws. Does that answer your question? Thanks. That's a long answer, and this is what I mean. I'm glad you asked for questions because I could go on forever if you wanted me to. And also, if we don't get the chance to do it today, please, whether I'm in the hallway or you want to give me a call, I'm an open book in terms of having a dialogue about what we're doing. Please.
How are you funded?
Privately. It's a 501c3. So that's probably more of a question for Russell. But it's a nonprofit organization, just like any other 501c3. The funding does not come through the USTA. There is some benefit to SRIF through our alliance because we can work with them. We have a shared mission and we're collaborating on this project. But the funding for SRIF is through donations to the 501c3. Also, I think, I don't know what Russell would think about this, but we're pretty mean and lean. Part of the plan we've had is we don't have to come together with privately funded investigations composed of tons and tons of people and a tremendous staff. The way that we've gone about it, through our partnership with the USDA and their investigative authority and powers under the rules and bylaws, is we're able to sort of share the cost and try and be as effective and also cost effective as we can. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Russell. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.